We're live.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome all those attending and viewing this remote meeting of the Harrogate Borough Council Overview and Scrutiny Commission. I'm Councillor Chris Aldred, the ward member for Fairfax in Harrogate, and I'm also the chair of the Commission. The Commission is, of course, grateful to all the officers and members for their attendance at this meeting and indeed for their support outside the meeting, and we'll deal with further introductions to those people as we start each agenda item. I would remind members and officers participating that they need to have regard to the guidance set out in HBC's remote meetings protocol and the privacy notice that goes with it. The usual meeting protocols and standing orders do still apply, and members of the Commission may only speak when they are asked to do so by myself as chair. Questions will be dealt with in order received in our meeting conversation chat function. Please do wait until I call your name before speaking, but equally, if you think I haven't seen your observation, please speak up. I would remind you I can only see a limited number of you on the screens in front of me. So if you put your hand up, I might not actually see it. So please use the chat function if you can do. And members of the Commission, if you experience technical difficulties, please call the meeting facilitator on the number provided, which is already there in the chat function. And if you need to leave the meeting early, please put a message in the chat as well. Thank you for your patience, particularly those of you watching the live stream. And we can now go into the meeting and the formal agenda. And as always, we start with apologies for absence. We don't have actually any apologies at the moment. We do have one member missing, who is Councillor Mann, but he's already advised us that he had another meeting which didn't finish till 5:30, and hopefully he'll be joining us any moment now. But all other members of the Commission are present. So item 2 is declarations of interest, and this is where we ask members if they have anything they do need to declare on tonight's agenda, and if it is a disclosable pecuniary interest, well, we will take the member out of the meeting for that item. Any declarations of interest, folks? Very good. So we move on to the minutes, and these are the minutes of our last public meeting, which was on the 28th of August. And we're asking if they are an accurate representation of that meeting. So
Chairman, can I just ask before we go to move those minutes? It's not about, well, it is slightly accuracy. On page 5, it says the leader added that councillors and members of the public were able to attend the leader meeting. And I would just like to query that, whether that's factually correct, because my understanding is councillors can, but I didn't know that members of the public could. And if that's the case, then that's fine. But if it's not correct, we should really amend, because if the public read this, they'll think they can join the leader meeting.
Thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Marsh. Actually, I did query that at the time, and I was told that members of the public can attend if they request to attend, but I don't know if you can clarify that, Mark.
I can't at the moment, Chair, but obviously if there is an amendment to that, that will be the meeting minutes will be amended, but the meeting minutes are as they are at the moment, and they have been through the checks as you've rightly said, in terms of any questions that have arisen as a result of them.
Okay, so bearing that in mind, and if we have to amend that later, we will amend that. Can I have a proposer, please, for these minutes?
I'm happy to propose.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Councillor Middlemas, and the seconder. I think Robert was going to move anyway, so do you want to second, Robert?
Yeah, fine.
That's great. Okay, so we have a proposer and seconder for the minutes. We need to vote on them, and this vote will actually act as a roll call for tonight's meeting as well. So over to the Scrutiny Governance and Risk Manager, Mr. Codman.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I'll ask each councillor in turn if they're going to vote for, against or abstain for the minutes, please. So, Councillor Chris Aldred.
For.
Councillor Sam Gibbs.
For.
Councillor Bernard Bateman.
For.
Councillor Nick Brown.
For.
Councillor Michael Harrison.
For.
Councillor Sue Lumby.
Sorry, 4.
Thank you. Councillor Pat Marsh.
4.
Councillor Nigel Middlemass.
For.
Councillor Norman Waller.
For.
Councillor Tom Watson.
Abstention.
Thank you. And Councillor Robert Windass.
For.
Thank you very much, Chair. That's carried.
So item 4 on the agenda is exempt information, and this is if there were some confidential legal advice, individual employment matters or commercial sensitive information as defined by the Local Government Act 1972. But I'm glad to tell you, members, that we have no such exempt information on any of our items on the agenda this evening. So we don't have to declare that. And also no public arrangement, no public questions, which is item 5 on the agenda. That's public arrangements. So we can now move to our main item this evening, which is item 6, our Harrogate District Community Recovery Plan for COVID-19. And members will be aware that in our last 2 formal meetings, we've looked in succession at the District Economic Recovery Plan and also our own internal Harrogate Borough Council Financial Recovery Plan. And we move now to the 3rd and final of these 3 recovery plans we committed to looking at back in April, which is the Community Recovery Plan. And for that, this item, we do welcome our 2 esteemed officers with us this evening. Our Director of Corporate Affairs, who is Rachel Bowles, and our Partnership and Engagement Manager, who's been doing a heck of a lot of hard work on community issues throughout the pandemic. That's Anne Byrne. Delighted to welcome both of you to the meeting tonight. Thank you very much for attending and indeed for all your hard work as well. And I believe it's Rachel who's going to kick off with an overview to the report and to the recovery plan as a whole. So over to you, Rachel.
Many thanks, Chair. So as you said, I'm Rachel Bowles, the Director of Corporate Affairs, and Anne Byrne, our Partnership and Engagement Manager, and to be fair, the person that's done the majority of the work on the Community Recovery Plan is also here to help. I'll be doing the overview, and then obviously during questions, if Anne wants to come in, then that'd be absolutely great. So I'm here today to present the COVID-19 Community Recovery Plan. Hopefully you've all had a chance to look at the documents that were appended to the agenda. Although we are now in a very different phase to when we first went into lockdown, the community is still very much asking for help, and although moving more to long-term requests, and we envisage there will be more requests over the next few weeks and months as cases are on the increase and as we've seen restrictions have started to be brought back in both nationally and in some local lockdowns. You will see from Appendix A a summary of the situation that we faced, and Appendix A is the larger Community Recovery Plan document and our response between March to July. I think it's really important to note here that this just wasn't a Harrogate Borough Council response, but it's been a collective response from across the district with all of our partners and the community working together. We focused on utilising existing structures that were already in place as there was no time to establish new ones, and we worked with partners to look at referral pathways for help based on residents needing short-term assistance or those that were already known to public service providers and required a different type of support to care for their needs. 6 community support organisations were quickly established, mirroring town localities, and all were already active within the community, some already delivering services on behalf of councils. So the support structure was established for those who were on the shielding list, with both welfare calls and food provision to supplement the centrally provided provision. And there was a time lag with that centrally provided provision that we looked to fill. On the subject of housing, we ensured that all of those, as was asked for by central government, who were homeless or at risk of being homeless or rough sleeping, were placed within accommodation through various housing options. And one thing that we can say is that the community and the voluntary and community sector were fast to respond and mobilise. We're extraordinarily fortunate within the Harrogate district that we have a huge, vibrant voluntary and community sector. And this allowed us to focus on the areas and wards where there wasn't as much community activity and where there was greater need. So we analysed the areas, we looked at where there was the vibrant voluntary and community sector that were already filling that need, and as a council, we then focused on those areas that weren't. We used redeployed staff to assist in getting the information out into the priority neighbourhoods alongside ward councillors. And you'll see from some of the other appendices that we were very successful in that, delivering over 35,000 leaflets. But ward councillors, community groups and emergency planning groups all helped us to do that. As you'll see from Appendix B, the current situation, shielding has been paused from the 1st of August and the welfare calls have ceased, although everyone was contacted prior to the shielding being paused to see if they needed continued support post the shielding period and were referred to the relevant organisation. And although the initial response phase has ended, we are still responding to requests for help and support within the community. There are still many residents across the district that do require assistance as they continue to isolate due to vulnerabilities, even though lockdown and shielding has ended or been paused. And this includes those that may be isolating due to having COVID symptoms or have been near to someone who has. We've been doing more targeted work following the evidence base that the Public Health England have provided of the more at-risk groups based on health inequality data. Therefore, we've been going out doing information drops in 10 wards that have high percentage of residents that are over 70, with those with long-term limited illness and low incomes. And we've also been mapping where BAME groups are living to check if we've covered the areas already with our information drops, and if not, we will do more. Calls continue to support our more vulnerable tenants. Our online health and wellbeing classes are providing ongoing rehabilitation to those who attended sessions at Fairfax and Howard Stein Community Centre. And we've undergone a period of consultation with residents and partners, and this, alongside regular feedback from partners and community groups, will ensure that the priorities and key issues that are very much live and reflect the current position are dealt with. Currently, the feedback that we've had from residents show that there were a lot of residents who continue to isolate due to fear that they will catch the virus and that behaviours of others could put them at risk. Appendix C, you'll see the community recovery plan, and that together with our partners that we've been working with on the community response, including the community support organisations, we have identified some key issues and priorities that will need to be addressed as part of our recovery planning across the Harrogate district. This will run in parallel with the response work should there be a local outbreak. Support structure continue to be in place and can be resumed and enhanced to address any increased need. So, the priorities. Within the North Yorkshire Resilience Forum, which is something that Harrogate Borough Council is part of, they also have established a recovery group. This sits across York and North Yorkshire, and they've identified 4 key themes that will be included as part of the community recovery plan. At a North Yorkshire level, these themes will be considered by working groups, and they are increased poverty or personal debt as a result of unemployment or business failure, bereavement and opportunities for remembering those who have died, maximising potential opportunities for the pandemic-related increase in volunteering and community action, including how this can be encouraged and supported into the future, and voluntary and community organisations suffering a loss of income or changed circumstance due to the lockdown. Beneath the North Yorkshire Resilience Forum priorities, we've also established a number of Harrogate District key priorities. These are local issues that will not be uncommon across the county and that need to be addressed and determined locally. The priorities that we have identified are planning and intelligence gathering, support for residents, community tensions, support for the voluntary and community sector, and bereavement and opportunities for remembering those who have died. We've also looked at other issues that may need further consideration, and alongside the priorities that we've established, we've also identified that there's a number of issues that we need to start thinking about as part of our business as usual and service planning, things that are direct outcomes from the impact of the virus, but also possible gaps in service provision that have come to the forefront. These have been detailed in the recovery plan, and partners are asked to consider what they can do to address them. They are young people and mental health, post-lockdown isolation anxieties and confidence to be active within the community again, health inequalities, building on the connections made, especially with health service and partners, community transport and digital technology. As far as we go with governance and monitoring, we need to utilise existing structures and projects, as a lot of officers and partners are working on response at capacity, and we're trying not to generate additional work. We have an internal group of key officers that meet monthly and monitor key information to build a picture of what is happening across our communities. And we're awaiting community food provider information to add to that table, which I believe is at Appendix D. We meet regularly with our community support organisations to make sure that we take on board their issues and concerns. And we're also an active part of the county-wide task and finish groups around poverty and support to the voluntary and community sector. We're looking locally at links with activity around existing projects such as the digital inclusion element and the pre-existing digital inclusion project, the local fund for opportunities to sustain the voluntary and community sector through funding, and the North Yorkshire loneliness campaigns and strategies. We're also looking at things that we can learn from our initial response, and we've done a small lessons learned or exercise to enable our continued response to be more effective. So some of the things that we've learned are that you can do things without asking permission first in a crisis, and basically that sometimes you've just got to get on with things that would normally require assessments, approval processes and time to deliver. You don't always have that time, and sometimes you've just got to crack on. We know that we need to utilise existing relationships when you have to respond quickly. There was no time to establish new systems and structures. We looked at what was already in the community and we went with it, even if we had to tweak it to fit the solution. Communication is key, and you can't communicate too much. However, you also can't do a blanket approach using just one communication channel, especially when you are looking to make sure that vulnerable people know where to get help if they need it. For example, a lot of the communication that's been used during COVID is digital, but quite a lot of residents don't use digital, which is why we also used paper. We delivered lots of leaflets to those communities which we thought would have high incidence. Residents look for reassurance locally, and we wanted to make sure that that happened. We also should have had base information ready in advance of where to get help and maps of zoned neighbourhoods for information drops and identifying priority need. It would have helped enormously if we had partner information as to where to get help pulled together as part of an emergency base, as it took time to get it together, agreed and signed off. The simple flyer worked in the first instance, followed by more detail, and we have a good base now for the future, and it would be quick to update with contacts. It would have helped if we had got all of our wards mapped with address lists and zoned, as well as demographic information, so that we could have hit the ground running a bit faster to keep the most vulnerable informed. We knew which wards have more deprivation, as work within these communities often, but we weren't necessarily aware of which wards had the most over 70 years of age populations or those with long-term limited illness. We utilised our local connections to our advantage to help in the situation faced, and we pulled in many favours and made requests. For example, the groundwork done with business contacts help us to source things like vans or fridges, and offers of help were amazing, such as hotels that were closed helping to cook food if required. 4 systems change that has worked out for the better, leading to an increase of customer satisfaction. For example, we've had to change the way our repairs team work. Customers are now given a precise time and a phone call rather than a previous paper system. Customer satisfaction has actually increased during the pandemic and has given us the nudge into a new way of working, which will continue. Tenant involvement. We're now holding almost all of our involved tenant panel meetings on Teams, and this is a real change from pre-COVID days where all of our tenant meetings were face-to-face with all the associated costs in terms of time, transport, etc. We've had such positive feedback that has been received, even from tenants who previously resisted technology. For example, it's really easy. Our tenant involvement officer gives me a number to phone when the meeting is about to start. I enter a meeting code and hey presto, I'm joining the meeting. We are hopeful that this new way of working may attract further interested tenants who may previously have been put off by having to attend a physical meeting. Some people just want to know that somewhere is there to help if they need it. And we've had many calls to just say thank you for the leaflet. Even if they didn't need it, they were keeping it on their mantelpiece just in case, and it made them feel less afraid knowing that someone was there if they needed assistance. And also partners in the community appreciated a phone call to check in for reassurance. No one knows how they should be working or what they should be doing all of the time. So just checking in with community-based organisations who are dealing with such a majority of community food providers welcomed a check-in where they can ask things that they weren't sure about or could be signposted to officers who can help, such as risk assessments to ensure they are COVID secure. And finally, people are afraid and emotions are high as the virus is unpredictable and unknown. And everyday officers had to deal with other people's emotions and behaviours, which was hard, but we just have to remember that we're all impacted by it personally and through our work. So that gives you a brief overview of the community response and our plans, and Anne and I would be happy to answer any questions.
That's great. Thank you ever so much, Rachel. That was really comprehensive. And just for those who might be viewing, members did have an informal briefing from Rachel and Anne last week, I believe. And a lot of questions were covered there. But one thing members did ask for is for more information on the lessons learned. And I think your last 5 minutes of your presentation there, Rachel, went into great depth into those matters. So thank you ever so much. It seems the council's doing better than the delivery systems, who only give you an hour or two window, don't they? But we can now give our tenants an exact time when a repairer will be there, which is absolutely brilliant. Okay, I've got several questions, but looking at the chat function, I can't actually see any questions from any other members of the commission. Could you, if you want to ask Rachel or Anne any questions, can you please indicate? And I think Councillor Mann is now joining us as well. So thank you very much indeed, Councillor Mann, as well, for attending tonight's meeting. In the absence, Councillor Marsh does have a question. I was very surprised that she didn't, but she does. So Councillor Marsh, the floor is yours. I assume this is going to be to Anne, but it could be to Rachel.
Actually don't know who it's aimed at, Councillor Aldred. I've no idea. But, you know, about asking questions, isn't that what Scrutiny is about? Can I just say it is very difficult because we did have an informal. All the questions I think I wanted to ask were raised in that meeting and I've had answered. So it's very difficult to keep raising the same issue. What I would like to ask, it's on page 42 on the piece of paper I've got, which is the, let me get it right, the Community Recovery Plan key information. Even, you know, since our informal meeting and now, we've still got the food bank vouchers issued, food parcels issued to be considered. Do we not have any figures at all with regards to that? And some of the information given there is relating to August, and we're now nearing into October. When will this document be updated? Because we are about to approach not going out, we could be going back in. So it's an essential document. So if you could just sort of get me, you might not have the numbers at your fingertips at the moment, but on page 42, the food bank vouchers issued and food parcels issued has got TBC on all of the block boxes.
Yeah, it's Anne. I'll answer that. As you're aware, that information actually comes from, it's not our own information, it actually comes from the community groups and the food banks They don't have the up-to-date information as yet on the because their information goes into wherever their central charity is. So we have to wait for them to come back to us with that information. We have received information from one community provider, which I can now include within that table. Like I say, we're relying on our partners, and they're actually really, we don't like to pressurise them because they're all responding and really busy, and I kind of sometimes feel not to badger them because they're busy on the ground delivering and me asking for statistics, but we are starting to get some of that information through, and I'll provide it as and when it's available.
Chairman, I can totally understand what Anne has said and the reasoning behind it, but maybe it should have been in there rather than to be considered. TBC means it's like it's being considered, whereas the explanation Anne's just given nicely into that document actually gives us that rounded information. So if in future, and again, I wouldn't want these people pressured, they've got more important things to do, but in future, if that's just put in there. And then, Chairman, just about the document, you know, most of it's August. We are going into difficult times, more cases, unfortunately. How often is this document updated?
We have a monthly meeting, so we update it monthly at the governance group.
Any
Can
further questions?
I just ask, Chairman, and then I will keep quiet. Can I ask when are you next meeting? Is it the end of this month?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay,
Chairman.
we have a question from Councillor Brown. Nick, you're muted.
Yes, I'm. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
It's really obviously the past is the past, and since our informal meeting, there has been changes at national level, and I just wondered how prepared we all are, and what the current position is as far as Harrogate's concerned, in terms of the possibilities of us being further measures taken in the Harrogate borough, and what the current situation is at this moment in time, and what the pinch points are in our borough. If someone could answer that, please.
So that's dealt with through the North Yorkshire Local Resilience Forum, and there are now weekly strategic command group gold meetings on Tuesdays. So we get that information on a weekly basis, and currently no area in North Yorkshire is subject to a local lockdown. Obviously that remains something that's looked at by the Director of Public Health and the Gold meeting all of the time, and we've recently, as everybody will know, had more national restrictions put in place. So we will continue over the winter months to monitor that and to try and make sure that our messaging and our planning is robust in case the Harrogate district does enter into any further lockdown measures. We are prepared. I think that, you know, we have learnt our lessons, particularly around the community response, and that we will be able to make sure that we can deal with that if it happens again. We're also obviously dealing with some of the national guidance that is coming out over the past week, such as the new self-isolation scheme, the £500 payment to those on low incomes if they need to self-isolate, and as part of that package, making sure that through that process that we give those residents information on where they can go for support. So we're building all of that communication within that process so that we're not doubling up on that, but we're getting it to source.
Thank you, Rachel, on that. Just another sort of quickie. The national figures for people getting the virus are going up fairly rapidly. Is the are the sort of the 10 o'clock pub finishes, finishing and all the rest of it? Who's monitoring that? in our borough. I presume it's licensing, is it, are involved in that? Because it's such a shame that, it does appear to be the younger end nationally who are almost sort of relaxed about everything. And I really despair about it, because you see all the photographs about and on the news bulletins about the young sort of enjoying themselves and arms around each other and all the rest of it. But those younger people have elder parents and grandparents. And how are we getting across to our community in the Harrogate borough that, you can't relax on the measures, social distancing, washing your hands, doing all the rest of it. But there's a great number who totally disregarding all this. What can we do to get this message across in our borough, is my question.
So we do have a communications plan. There is as part of the strategic, the local resilience forum, there is a communications group, and part of their remit is, and that's with both the county council, district councils, the police, etc., etc., etc. And as part of that communications plan, they're the sorts of things that they're looking at, and that is then pushed out through our communications channels. I think it's imperative that we all follow the rules, that we all understand what the rules are, and that everybody does their bit. I think what has come out of the evidence to date is that it's household to household transmission that is potentially causing figures to rise. But yes, we all need to do our bit. We're very thankful at the moment that whilst North Yorkshire cases are rising, it's not rising as fast as in some other parts of the country, but that does not mean that we should be complacent and that we all need to follow the rules.
Well, I can heartily endorse that last remark, but it is worrying. It's this sort of once a week report that you get. Do you consider that's enough information that you're getting?
It's not once a week. So the strategic command group meets once a week, but then there's a tactical group that also meets. And then there's obviously other groups that meet around that. So from a public health point of view, the Director of Public Health, together with health colleagues, push out data as and when it is needed.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Rachel, and obviously some very well timed words there about the need for us all to observe the rules and regulations as they stand. I know I've got questions from Councillor Bateman and Councillor Mann, but Anne, you just typed something into the chat, and I just, for the benefit of anybody watching the live stream who can't see the chat, you were just giving us some further information on the dates of the next meetings, which I think Councillor Marsh was asking about.
Yeah, it's just our internal meetings at the beginning of October, so the data will be updated. We can't update the September data until the end of the month anyway, so there will be more information coming through in the next few weeks. Okay,
thank you for clarifying that, Anne. Councillor Mann, thank you very, very much for joining us following your previous meeting, and I believe you've got both a comment and a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Apologies, I was slightly late. Just to say, I just thought the Council's response during lockdown to the needs of the community, especially in central Harrogate, which I represent on county and panel at ward level, was just amazing, really. I helped out a little bit with HADSA, formerly I think it's Harrogate and Ripon Community Action, now called Harrogate and District Community Action, but they were very complimentary about what the council team was doing in relation to supporting the 6 CSOs, one of which was Harrogate and District. And I just thought that the effort which everybody made was just amazing. I mean, Harrogate and District Community Action, I think, had, as a result of the publicity which the council team and ward councillors got out, I think we had about 3,000 volunteers doing stuff. It was just absolutely amazing. So with that in mind, I'm just wondering what the costs were then, during lockdown compared to now. I mean, as you know, North Yorkshire made a similarly huge effort to help the community, and I think their spending, from memory, was running at about 2.5 million a week at one point. I just wonder what our spending was. I know it was well within our budget, because our council has good finances. And I'm just wondering also what we're spending at the moment. I know a lot of the work has been scaled back. I know people are not. The shielding programme is paused, as you were saying. So I was just from a practical point of view, I just wondered what costs were running at per month at the moment. That was all. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Mann, do you mean just the cost of the community part of the?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just for the community recovery plan, the community aspects, really.
The majority of costs would be staff costs, and we've basically allocated time from various officers to make sure that we can complete the community work. So they're indirect costs almost to that. We were also very fortunate, or it depends how you look at it, in that we allocated quite a lot of redeployed staff during the initial response. So for those services that were stood down due to national restrictions, such as in culture, tourism and sport, parking services, etc., rather than those staff staying at home and not working, Anne and myself were very fortunate that quite a number of those were allocated to us to enable us to take forward the community response work, particularly delivering the leaflets, making the welfare check calls, etc., etc. So our actual physical costs of producing material and supporting organisations would have been a lot lower. Basically, and do we have specific? I don't have that to hand. I think
no,
we might need to circulate some costs.
Yeah, I don't have any costs per se. The only things that I've incurred costs are printing costs for the leaflets, and that we kind of incurred that cost for some of the CSOs. But wherever possible, we've just we've not really had any costs. Like I say, it's mainly been staff. We've not had to purchase any food. We actually were provided with some food boxes from the central supply, and then we've also made a few purchases to help some of the food banks, just with some general like foil trays and things like that, which was at the real peak of lockdown, but we've not had any other costs that we've incurred.
We've been extraordinarily grateful to the community and voluntary sector, and also to business who've donated many things that we've required, from fridges, vans, PPE, food. Our role has been more to facilitate and make sure that it all gets to where it needs to go, and that we're enabling the voluntary organisations to be able to deliver what they need to do and not have to purchase things. So, we've taken on board, if they've said to us that, they're low on food, or if they've said to us that they need fridges, or that they need help with delivery, or that they need to get the information out, then we've managed, because we had people to be able to do that, to facilitate their needs and let them get on with delivering what they need to on the ground. So really, other than printing costs and some small costs that we've absorbed within our team, we haven't seen those larger costs.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Mann? I think you're still on mute, John. You're on mute still, John, if you're going to come back.
Thank you, pardon, Chair. Always doing that. No, just to say thank you for the answer. I'm content. Thank you.
OK, I know we've got a question from Councillor Bateman out there in sunny Ripon, or near to sunny Ripon.
only sunny at the moment, but I think, I mean, we're fortunate in some ways that we don't have university or college towns, because you look at the where all the young people have been causing problems. My granddaughter's in York, and you see York is really for their fresh air events. They're certainly poured out on the weekend, and I think we haven't had that fortunately within the Harrogate district area.
So that was a comment rather than a question then?
Yes, that was a comment on why we're being fortunate. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we are unfortunate in many ways that we don't have a higher education provision within the district, but yes, I suppose you could look at it like that. I think there's a question from Councillor Watson out in Nidderdale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, just a quick question. It's a question on the homeless and rough sleepers. What are the numbers that in the Harrogate Borough area that are in temporary accommodation as of today? I don't know if you can answer it, or it might be a question you can't. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Just for you, I can answer it. We were fortunate and asked that question before we came to the meeting, so we've currently got 13 in accommodation.
13, has that number dropped down or has it risen over the summer?
It's dropped down.
Dropped down. Thank you for that, Rachel. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think that was 29 at, am I right in saying and reading the report, was it 29 at the start? Yeah,
it was high 20s at the beginning when we first responded to the no rough sleepers. Yeah.
So presumably these rough sleepers have been moved on into permanent or at least temporary accommodation within our kind of normal arrangements. Is that the case?
As part of the package of support, each person that was placed into temporary accommodation needs to have a long-term plan. So we are working with each individual to make sure that their housing needs are met going forward. So some of that might be moving them into private rented or into social accommodation, etc., etc. But each person that we work with, and part of the funding that we were allocated was to make sure that they had a long-term plan wrapped around them.
Right, and those numbers have dropped considerably, and I mean there are some positives to come out of this pandemic. This isn't a question, this is a comment, because I was going to push you on the question as well about Tom got there before me, but I mean it really did concern me at the start of the pandemic that what was going to happen to the homeless, and I think nationally the country's come together, and it really could be a turning point in homeless prevention nationally. I think if we can stick to those lower numbers rather than the higher numbers, and I know the report, the first couple of paragraphs of your report, and does actually show there's been quite a few positives, hasn't they? We know about the negatives, but not just in the homelessness, but in terms of the community spirits, neighbourhoods, people actually talking to the neighbours, people concerned about the neighbours, doing the neighbours shopping, etc., etc. So there are swings and roundabouts of this, and I think we should emphasise the positives whenever we can, because there has been quite a few. I don't know if either of you wants to comment or we just move on.
I think it's about building on that, Councillor Aldred. So yes, one of the reasons why volunteering is one of our key priorities is because as people went into lockdown, we saw a huge increase in the number of volunteers, and as he said, enabling us and all of the rest of it. And it's actually building on that and harnessing it as people are going back to work, as they're re-entering their workplaces, as the furlough scheme ends, etc., etc. We want to make sure that those numbers that are volunteering and that enabling us doesn't dissipate. And you know, we want to make sure that those good things that have come out of this awful pandemic are embedded almost within the community.
Great. I don't have any more questions in the chat function. I've still got a...
Chairman, could I ask a question, please? Sorry.
Of course you can, Councillor Mark.
Just to say, with the, have you got any update on the test and trace issue with regards to Harrogate? We're all being encouraged to download the app on our iPhones or our smartphones or whatever. Do we know how testing's going in Harrogate? Are we having it regularly? Is there regular testing points, or do we have to travel?
My belief at the moment, although I may have to clarify this and send it around to members, is that we have a testing station twice a week in Harrogate, and it is being considered whether or not that could be increased. Obviously, the test and trace system is a national system, and I can't comment any further on whether or not it's fulfilling the Harrogate residents' needs, but I can try and find out more information if required.
Yeah, I didn't expect you to have sort of that kind of information, Rachel. I was just wondering whether, if we felt, particularly with the Leeds being on the brink of it, or I think in lockdown or whatever, we're so close to that and close to the other northeast ones. Is there a way that we can request nationally that we need to up the game with regards to it?
My understanding is that has been done, and that they're actively considering Harrogate, increasing the number of days that Harrogate has a testing site.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you.
I still have a couple of questions, which I'm going to plough on with. But fellow councillors, if you do have any questions, just ask them in the chat function, please. But going back to the Stonefall on the crematorium, and I think I've mentioned when we talked about the economic recovery, what a splendid job those council officers have done during this pandemic. They've really been at the front line. Can you just confirm the current arrangements there? Are funeral numbers, are they kind of steady? Are they? I know the numbers attending. Are we still? Is it still 30 or is it under that now? I'm not quite sure myself what the current arrangements are.
And the current national guidance, I believe, is for 30 still, and that is what we offer at Stonefall. From my one-to-ones with the head of service there, the numbers of services being held has decreased significantly from the pandemic high, and that we're currently lower than average,
which is good news. And we are looking in the future still at some kind of long-term commemoration of people who passed away at Stonefall. I believe there's an idea about some kind of sculpture or some such.
Yes, so we are commissioning a sculpture for Stonefall. I believe it may already have been commissioned, and we're looking at a way of a celebration of an event to allow people to celebrate the lives of those that were lost, and that where they were unable to do that.
Thank you. You also mentioned there furlough, Rachel, and Nick mentioned earlier we are now coming into a different stage of the pandemic, and indeed the economic arrangements nationally, and the Chancellor's furlough scheme is coming to its conclusion. And I noted our figures for people who aren't paying council tax, etc., went up significantly. And I suspect that probably when that furlough, there's going to be quite a few people who will unfortunately not be able to return to their jobs. Have we internally within the council, have we got arrangements on hold for an increase in the benefits, which we undoubtedly are going to have to kind of be paying out in the next couple of months? Have we got the staff there to get on with the job very, very quickly when the situation arises.
Yes, so I think that we have expected that applications for various benefits have increased and as they have done, and there is an expectation that we may see another spike as furlough ends and the Chancellor's new schemes start to come into play. We're just working through the guidance for the new schemes to see how that might impact on our residents and what that might look like, so that we can make sure that we do have adequate capacity within the teams to deal with anything that comes through.
And I did notice in the report at the end, you mentioned there was going to be some residents, I think it was tenants more than all residents, but some consultation during September. And I presume that was what the results of that were what you were referring to earlier, where in the lessons learnt category, Rachel, when you were talking about the some feedback we actually have had from our tenants.
The consultation was any resident. It wasn't just our tenants.
Ah, right.
We went out to consultation with residents as well as with partners, our tenants and customers. So that consultation process. I'll bring Anne in here now for how many responded, because I haven't got that information at my fingertips, and I'm sure Anne knows it much better than I do.
Yeah, I don't have the exact number, but we had a couple of hundred people responded. We've just been working through that document now because we're some of the questions that we asked are signposting us to where we may need to get more information out in the community if they said that they didn't know where to go for help, because we got the geographical areas we're then working on and looking at where we need to go out. And some residents actually provided their contact details to say that they wanted us to get in touch with them, and the ones that we have actually contacted them and then referred them on into the community support provision, maybe that they were feeling lonely or they wanted to be part of whatever activities there are, be it virtually. So we've actually gone through those results and signposted people on, so that it's not just words on a piece of paper. We've actually acted on it, and we're actually just doing a little bit of further in-depth work, and then we're sharing the results with each of the CSOs, the community support organisations, so they know what potentially some of their residents in their area, what their concerns are, so that they can then factor that into their work that they're doing within the community.
Thank you very much indeed, Anne. I think Councillor Brown has got what he describes as a comment. You'll have to unmute, Ronnie.
Yes, I've unmuted. It was just a comment that rose out of your requests for information on Stonefall. I sadly went to a virtual funeral the other day, and I just wondered whether anybody knew about it. This sort of thing where you're limited to 30 people at a funeral. But this was from Ripon Cathedral, and it was a virtual funeral via YouTube. And I didn't know that sort of existed. And I thought it ought to be made public that if you do have a funeral that sadly you have to go to, and you're restricted because of the 30 limit, I don't know. Does anybody else know anything about this? Because it was quite a moving experience. It was fairly static, but it ought to be made public that YouTube seemed to have a device that you can use. I don't know whether it's commercially, what the fees would be or what have you. But it was, I thought, pretty good to have that. So more than 30 people can attend via YouTube a funeral service. It depends on the church or the place that the funeral's been held at. But I thought it was rather a good idea.
So, Councillor Brown, we actually offer that service at Stonefall. So you can attend a service of ours virtually.
and I think we offer that. We've offered that before the pandemic, didn't we?
I think it's been in place for just over 2 years.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, that's at Stonefall, but I've never seen it advertised or mentioned. Maybe that's because I don't go to a lot of funerals, but I think it's good that exists in Stonefall, but also in churches perhaps as well, and that may give comfort to people who sadly have suffering a bereavement through the virus.
Yeah, and my belief is that many churches are now offering both virtual mass or services on Sundays as well as virtual. So one of the things that has come out of the pandemic is that most organisations are now looking at alternative ways of delivering. And I was at Ripon Cathedral a couple of weeks ago speaking to Dean John, and I asked him, did he think that this would be now something that would be continued forever? And he said it was undoubtedly that they would continue the virtual services as well as going to church, and the numbers of people that were watching the services online was growing every week.
Yeah. Thank you.
I can back that up from personal experience from St. Peter's here in Harrogate as well. I've had a conversation with the vicar there, and they are very keen to continue the virtual services in tandem with the actual services, because they're reaching people who can't attend church.
Well, that has been fairly common, these virtual services, but this was the first time I saw a funeral being transmitted.
Councillor Watson, I think you had your hand up. Have you got a further question, Tom?
Yeah, just to help Nick out on that, we were involved in the YouTube experience, and it was viewed by other family members in New Zealand, United States and Canada very successfully. And I think I fed it back to Rachel. The comments that came back were, over the moon the people were, because they said, what a splendid funeral service it was, and credit to Harrogate Borough on this one, because I've heard other comments from other councils not so great. So there we go. Full marks to us. It's great. Is that okay? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. I've just got a couple of other very, very minor questions, and I can't see any more actual questions. I've got a comment from Councillor Marsh, who's left us, but I'll reiterate that in a minute. But I saw there was some mention about, in the initial stages, I think this is Anne, for you, Anne, community transport was a bit of an issue in certain areas, i.e. it relies on volunteers, and those volunteers were having to withdraw their services for various reasons. And I think we, as the council, arranged some alternative arrangements in some areas. How's that kind of panned out now? Because obviously buses are back almost functioning. Well, the services are functioning, obviously, in slightly a different matter. But the community transport is separate to that anyway, I know. Has there been any kind of developments there? Is that almost back to normal,
Anne? Things like the community car driver schemes that are provided haven't resumed, because they are largely volunteer led, and it's really hard to be COVID secure if you're having to assist people into vehicles. A lot of the people that use those types of transport need assistance. And at the moment, unfortunately, with regards to the rise and the increase as well in cases, it's just not possible for those schemes to take place. I've been made aware that there has been some has been some community transport per se. I'm aware of a charity who loaned their minibus so that food could be delivered. So the community transport has been used for alternative provision as part of the response, but unfortunately there are difficulties because it has to be COVID secure and the volunteers need to remain safe. There was a North Yorkshire County Council did actually provide some community transport for those who needed to get to places because that didn't require assistance for medical appointments only. I know that Yorkshire, the patient transport scheme is back up and running again now. So unfortunately, community transport is going to remain an issue for those that use the supported schemes, because unfortunately it's just the risk assessments that have to be carried out. It's just not secure for the volunteers to be having, it's all about the social distancing, and you can only probably get maybe 2 or 3 in a minibus. And with regards to a lot of the vehicles that are used with voluntary car driver schemes are actually the volunteers' cars, and it's the whole cleaning down, and it's just not feasible at the moment. So there is an issue still with regards to those types of community transport. It's sort of one of those we've just got to work with it at the moment. There's no resolution because of the increase in cases at the moment.
I know from within my own ward, it's something a lot of people do rely on, particularly with the cutback of the buses. I mean, we had an issue with the X4 service being cut about 18 months ago now. And a lot of people relied on that to get to medical appointments and shopping in Harrogate. And they were using community transport, which now, as you say, is even more difficult. So I think it's something as a council we do need to keep on top of that, because it is a lifeline for an awful lot of people. I know personally, and you probably are monitoring it.
We are monitoring it. I think it's also important to say that where there's an identified need, so where an individual, as you said, needs prescriptions, needs shopping, etc., we're putting in place alternative arrangements. Whilst that doesn't, one of the issues is people wanting to go out, isn't it? And that's one of the things that community transport does. Whilst we can't necessarily assist with that, we are making sure that if they need prescriptions, if they need food, if they need to get their shopping done, etc., that we can fulfil those physical needs, so that somebody isn't at risk or disadvantage through not being able to access community transport, if that makes sense. And there are some community transport providers that are doing the those who are vulnerable trips to appointments and hospital appointments to make sure that those still happen. But I completely appreciate that doesn't support somebody's desire to go shopping themselves, to get out and about for their own health and well-being.
Yeah, I really do think this is something that's going to be a bigger issue post-pandemic than it probably was before, and maybe something we as a local authority, and indeed our friends in North Yorkshire, have to look at. But thank you very much indeed for that information, Rachel. The only other thing I had looking through the report earlier, I think has actually been answered in an email and sent out shortly before this meeting. There was an update, 4:30, I think, Anne. You've been very busy, obviously, today. And I was just going to ask why Ripon was privileged with the mental health support scheme for young people, but I think you answered it in the email. It's the YMCA in Ripon, isn't it, who set it up? Is it something we could look at expanding if maybe there was a need identified in Harrogate?
There are other there are other providers doing things across the district as well. So the Children and Young People Service, Families, the County Council, they are offering various mental health online training, and we're aware of other charities such as Mind and Wellspring Therapy. There's other various services. It just so happens that the Ripon one is being promoted today, but there are other opportunities for individuals and families to seek assistance.
Great. Okay. Any further questions, councillors? I haven't got anything else on the chats. I think, Nick, were you good? You waved? Was that?
Yes, it was just a very quick one, really. I don't know whether Rachel will be able to answer it, but we all got an email from David Clothier about the local land charges searches. I don't know if anybody saw it, but it was just a bit concerning because, with the pandemic causing sort of problems with mental health and all the rest of it, one of the greatest times of unease is when you're moving house or planning to move, and there's a hold up on processing timescales regarding local land charge searches, and I just wondered if Rachel is aware of this, and what are we going to be doing to try and speed up the thing. It was a fairly lengthy and detailed email from David Clothier, but it was quite concerning, really, because if there's a hold up in people doing searches when they're planning to move, having done a deal on the house they're going to, this is quite serious, really, and maybe Rachel could answer that.
I'm sure Rachel is aware of it. I don't know if it really comes within the format of the
coronavirus, the pandemic.
Well, the community recovery plan, it's more economic, but Rachel, I don't know whether you
thank you.
I
don't have I do know that there is obviously the delays that you've just expressed there, Councillor Brown, and I did see Dave Clothier's email. It's not within one of my service areas, so I don't have detailed knowledge of it, but I know that it's a high priority to get that reduced. That was one of the reasons for emailing councillors, to make sure that all of them knew the measures that we were taking to reduce the current delays back down to more acceptable levels. I think one of the key issues that we've had is that as we entered the pandemic, we also put in place, as part of the financial recovery plan, a recruitment freeze, and that one of the services that was adversely affected by that was Dave Clothier's service, who had quite a high number following a restructure of vacancies within that service. So that has an impact. We are now starting to, I believe, fill those vacancies, which should go some way to helping the situation. But unfortunately, when you put in place things to mitigate a risk in one area, such as finance, and we didn't know at the time when we put the recruitment freeze in place the impacts that have in other areas. So it's a very delicate balancing act, and as we gradually release some of those posts to be filled, we have to be mindful of both the financial and the service impact.
Right. Anyway, you are aware of it, and obviously something's going to happen, because, as I say, it's part of one's life if you are moving, and it gets very tense. Moving, I'm told, is one of the worst experiences.
Moving and getting married, Nick, apparently.
Sorry?
Moving and getting married, Nick.
Well, probably.
So if you do them both together, you've had it.
Well, quite. But I would just say, Chairman, that I think it is important, because we're talking about the effects of the pandemic and COVID, and this is one of the effects. For whatever reason, I'm not being critical of that, but I just wanted to make sure that it's been dealt with, because there's a big hold up, a big backlog, I think, developing, and this may affect people moving within our borough.
Indeed, I think actually one of the reasons we got Mr. Clothier's email was estate agents and solicitors are making more of a thing of this than it actually is. As I understand it, from some residents of mine, we're being told, oh, there's a backlog at the council of 3 or 4 months, when it's only about 23 days or 28 days. So it's not as bad as some kind of professional services, if we say, we're making out. The council often takes the book, I think, and in this case it's not quite as bad as it's been made out. But I think Councillor Bateman, who is actually in the process of moving himself.
It's currently 8 weeks.
Have you got a comment?
It's currently 8 weeks.
8 weeks, thank you.
Yeah, searches are taken, except it's all of it. It's about 8 weeks now.
So there, from the horse's mouth, Nick.
There we are. Yeah.
Not good, but it's not exactly 3 months. So,
No.
anyway, let's move on. I think we don't have any further questions for Rachel or Anne, which is great. Can I reiterate? And Councillor Marsh has gone, but she's put it in the chat function, so I'll read out what she said. She says she has to leave, but she was once again wanting to thank all the staff for going the extra mile for all our residents. And on behalf of the Commission, can I formally reiterate that? Because I think we have got such a great staff at Harrogate Borough Council, and we've kind of talked previously of most staff going the extra mile and the people who've been put into jobs they didn't do before the pandemic, doing an excellent job as well. And I would particularly like to say, and she might blush, but I want to praise Anne and her team, because I've had a little bit of experience of dealing with them on a couple of occasions throughout the pandemic, and the help they've given me in my ward and distributing leaflets, etc. And I know Anna's been there actually kind of parceling up leaflets and getting things out, literally morning, noon and night. I hate to think about the hours you've put in, Anne, but really, can you pass, on behalf of the Commission, our most, and of our residents, as Pat said, our most grateful thanks to you and your team, because you've really stepped in the gap and come to the fore here. And I think the community response has been one of the most positive things to come out in there tying it all together, Anne. So thank you ever so much on behalf of us all.
Many thanks, Chair. And I think that I speak for Anne as well when I say for us it's also thanks to the community, the voluntary and community sector, and our partners and everybody that's played a part in the community response. I have to say that I've had my socks blown off by our staff, and I've been incredibly proud to be part of the community response team. They've been absolutely brilliant, but I also have to say that our residents, our community, our voluntary and community sector, and our partners have also blown me away, and it's been one of the most rewarding experiences. I wouldn't wish a pandemic on anybody, but it has absolutely blown me away how people have come together and supported each other and gone above and beyond to deliver to make sure that our vulnerable residents are safe.
Great. Now then, do we formally have to vote on that, Mark? Do we?
No, you don't, Chair. I don't think there was any particular. I mean, unless there's a general feeling about anything, I think there's a general feeling about acceptance of the report. That's the purpose of the report, to update members and provide the opportunity for feedback. The feedback's been noted, and any particular action points will be taken forward anyway. So I don't think there's a formal requirement to actually take a vote on that item, Chair.
Okay. In which case, just to tidy up a bit of admin from previously, on the minutes and Councillor Marsh's question about whether members of the public can attend leader meetings, and indeed I suppose that must go for all cabinet member meetings, it has been clarified by our colleague Elizabeth Jackson, who's our Democratic Services Officer, that members of the public can attend these meetings. And I think I'm just being told by the wonders of modern technology that all councillors will be getting an email tomorrow confirming these arrangements. So that means the minutes are correct, and we will be getting a further information. Because I must admit, I didn't know that members of the public could attend these meetings. So I'd be grateful of the clarification personally as to how members of the public make those arrangements, particularly in these COVID times. Okay, so that moves us on to item 7 on the agenda, which is our forward plan of key decisions. We have this on the agenda at all our meetings, so that members can be aware when reports will be published and the named leads officers. I don't think there's actually anything within the current timescale, although I think Claire Wilson can update us on a couple of the dates that have actually changed since we got the printed copy. I think the plan as it stands on the website is absolutely bang up to date. But Claire, there's been a couple of little changes, has there?
Oh, thank you, Chair. That's right. There's nothing in the call-in period now, and one date has changed, which is the kitchen refurbishment item. The decision's now due before the 31st of March 2021. Thank you.
Lovely. So item 8 is feedback from other committees and external bodies. And I think we've got 2 hopefully brief reports from a couple of our fellow councillors. Councillor Middlemas is going to update us on the meeting of the Scrutiny of Health group from North Yorkshire, which I believe you attended, Nigel, on the 11th of September.
Yeah, I did. And if I can emphasise, it was before the new restrictions came in and before officially the R8 went over 1, so things might change. Some specific things. The first is that the Church Avenue surgery is going to permanently close its Hampthwaite surgery. It's actually been closed since COVID-19 came in, but the surgery essentially is simply not suitable for use going forward. So people need to be aware that that's going to close. The second specific point was that West Yorkshire and particularly Leeds were very keen that we should keep the Nightingale Hospital open in case of a second wave of COVID, which obviously we have done, but they're very grateful to us for the fact that we have kept it open. The other specific point, which doesn't affect us enormously, is just that the government has approved in principle a £40 million investment in developing Scarborough Hospital. And there was a lot of discussion around the specifics of that. The rest of the discussion was actually to do with the NHS recovery plan, which obviously is a very complicated issue, but I think I only need to highlight a couple of points. The first is that for the foreseeable future, GP practices will continue with the model of you phone them first, if necessary you have a video conference, and only after that you'll have face-to-face meetings with doctors. And that's going to continue for months, probably for even longer than that now that things are getting worse. The second point was that the NHS actually planned to get back up to between 90% and 100% capacity sometime between November and March, but that would still leave quite a significant backlog. But in part, that is being helped by the fact that the government essentially is buying something like 75% of private sector capacity to try and help to clear the backlog. But there is going to be a backlog for a long period of time. Even if they get up to 100% capacity, they're still going to have to catch up with all of the operations and other things that they haven't been able to do for the last 6-7 months. So it's essentially going to be a long haul, but the NHS is doing its best to catch up as soon as it can. And that was essentially what we discussed.
Thank you, Nigel. I don't know if it's appropriate to take questions or you just take the report back, but there isn't any hands or questions up. So let us leave it. Thank you very much indeed for that.
Okay.
Councillor right. And I believe Councillor Brown, who's the chair of our own ONS Task and Finish group, looking into the recycling event last year, the UCI event. I believe you've got an update on your working group, Nick.
Yes, really not very much to say on it, Chairman, except it's rather pertinent, as it is actually 1 year now since the event was being held. And effectively, we asked for a whole load of documents, as Mark knows, and some of them were going to be posted out to various people. And it was the likelihood was that most people would not have an opportunity to read all the papers. So we put forward the meeting, and it's this Thursday, October the 1st. And effectively, we've been looking at pre-event information. We've still not got all of the information, but that will be discussed on Thursday by the Task and Finish group. But we are making moderate progress as we move forward. But there's quite a bit of time and effort to go yet before we're anywhere near getting to grips with it. But we are asking for a whole load of information. As you have probably seen in this week's ACRA group information, it's already started the discussion about the UCI of 12 months ago, and it's quite interesting to see it in the paper. But ours is obviously not in the public domain yet, but we will endeavour to move forward with it with all haste.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Nick. I did actually spend a little bit of time watching BBC Two yesterday afternoon, and they had this year's World Championships, which were in Italy, but they actually started that off with a little bit of a look back at last year's World Championships in Harrogate, and it was interesting to see, shall we say. But again, Harrogate getting a little bit of publicity out of that a year later. Okay, so that almost brings us to the end of tonight's meeting. Can I thank all the members and officers for attending? Can I just remind members, our next meeting is on the 9th. We've now done all the 3 recovery plans we said we were going to do back in April. So we're moving on slightly from COVID, although it will obviously be still with us, and it will be raising itself as an issue in everything we discuss, I should imagine. But the next meeting is a very important meeting. It's the one where we discuss the medium-term financial strategy of the council, which actually has gone to Cabinet, and we have had this for the last couple of weeks. You've actually had it as a bit of paper, or you can see it. You've been emailed it. Now, there's a slight little change to the normal arrangements. We normally discuss this document on a normal year as soon as it's been to Cabinet. This wasn't possible this year for various reasons, but we all know we're going to discuss this document in detail, and it's obviously a vital document for the council going forward. It sets the parameters for next year's budgets for a start, but obviously it's a longer term than that, medium term, as it says. So going forward, our financial strategy at HBC, very important document that. I'd urge you all to read it, and if you have got any specific questions where you want more detailed information, we are not going to have an informal meeting before the 19th of October. So any questions you have, rather than the officers having to go away and send you emails later, if you want them actually answered at the meeting, certainly if they're technical, and obviously a lot of financial matters are, please can you read the document well in advance of the meeting and actually convey your questions to either Mark or Claire, our officers supporting this commission, and then hopefully the information can be made available at the actual meeting on the 19th of October. So thank you for that. Thank you for today. And I now have to say the magic words. That concludes today's meeting. Thank you to all members, participants and officers for attending and contributing.